Hi everyone, it's Rax. I have been blasting the Season 20 PTR, testing absolutely everything, and I'm ready to release an avalanche of videos. Let's start with the Legacy of Dreams Hydra build, which is actually pretty good. At the end of this video, I'll show you a 125 solo that I did. Now, there's something that you should know. Arcane Torrent is currently bugged on the public test realm, and it's double dipping the bonuses of Death Wish, Etched Sigil, and Mantle of Channeling. We're all expecting this to be fixed after the PTR on live. So what's happening is Hydra wizards who choose to use Arcane Torrent are way stronger than they really should be. So in the clear that you're going to see me do, I used a different skill to channel so you could see how actually powerful it's going to be on live servers. So let me get into the build, and one more comment. The reason why I don't use the set is Legacy of Dreams I think is just straight up better. It has roughly the same damage, but you get a bunch of extra legendaries from not having all of your pieces occupied by the set. And also the set has some gimmicks where if you take damage then your Hydra heads die, and it's just not fun to deal with. So I'm going to recommend, unless there are changes, to go with the Legacy of Dreams version. Starting off with the weapon, we have Death Wish. One thing to note, you're going to wear Death Wish or Serpent Sparker, whichever one you get a better one of, and then cube the other one. So it doesn't matter which one you wear. Death Wish, and the reason that this is amazing is when we channel Arcane Torrent, all of our damage is going to be increased by 325%. This will apply to our Hydras. They'll do massive damage. We want percent damage, attack speed, and area damage if we can get it. And the interesting thing about this build is you do not need any cooldown. You don't need any at all. So we can take area damage and attack speed wherever we can in place of it. Etched Sigil, when we channel Arcane Torrent, our spenders are going to be increased by 150%, and it's also going to cast one of our arcane spenders. So as we're channeling our Arcane Torrent, it's going to cast black holes for us, which is going to give us more damage. If we can get it, we'd like crit, area damage, APOC, which is arcane power on crit, and Hydra damage. For the boots, we are taking illusory boots so we can move freely through the monsters. Int, Vit, All Resist, and Armor are the best rolls here. For the pants, we want Swampland Waders. These typically only drop as a Witch Doctor, so what you will do is create a level 1 Witch Doctor, craft or gamble for some yellow pants, and upgrade rare using recipe 3 in the cube on a Witch Doctor. Can be level 1, doesn't have to be level 70, in order to get these for your wizard. Then you'll have to bring it over to the wizard and get the right stats for it. So fire, int, vit, and armor is what we would like, and we're going to sock it with intelligence. Halo of Carini, we're going to take 80% less damage after our Storm Armor electrocutes an enemy. Our Storm Armor will be up all the time, so it's just 80% less damage. It's incredible. Crit area damage is what we want, and we want the Enforcer Gem, which is going to make our pets deal 60% more damage. And Convention of the Elements, crit area damage, we're going to deal 200% increased damage on our fire cycle, and we will take the Tagak gem because as we're channeling, we're going to get 80% increased damage at 150, and we're also going to get 20% increased armor when we get the 10 stacks. Herg Brash's Binding, this is going to reduce the arcane power cost of our Arcane Torrent. This is going to allow us to keep our Aquila buff up all the time so we don't drop our Squirt's Necklace buff. Int, Vit, percent life, and armor is what we're looking for. For the gloves, we'll take the Quadfecta, attack speed, crit area damage. Remember, we don't need any cooldown. TNT or Tascarin Theo is going to increase the attack speed of our Hydras by 50%. Mantle of Channeling, while we're channeling Arcane Torrent, we're going to deal 25% increased damage and take 25% reduced damage. Int, Vit, area damage, and Hydra is what we want here. The Magistrate, I don't think this has been updated yet. It's going to give us additional damage, and our Hydras are going to cast a Frost Nova. And we want int, crit, and arcane power on crit. Now, you may not need both arcane powers on crit on both the Etched Sigil and The helmet, I went with just one and it was perfectly fine. So if you're good with just one, you could take Vitality here or something. And we're going to sock it with an Amethyst for 23% life because, again, we don't need any cooldown. Aquila, while we're above 90% resource, we're going to take 50% less damage. We should be above 90% all the time. Int, Vit, and Hydra damage is what we're looking for. Again, socketing with Topazes for more intelligence, more damage. Squirt's Necklace, Fire, Crit, Crit. Trifecta is what we're looking for. And of course, this is a Legacy of Dreams build. We are going to take no set items, and for every ancient or primal ancient that we have, we're going to get 750% increased damage per every item and 4% reduced damage taken. And you only need to level this gem to 99, so that's a big plus. And finally, for the bracers, Ancient Parthon Defenders, or otherwise known as APDs. Every enemy within 25 yards that's stunned is going to reduce our damage taken by 12%. Remember, our Hydras are going to be casting Frost Nova, so there should be some stunned enemies. Fire, Int, Vit, Crit is what we're looking for. Now onto the skills. Explosive Blast, Chain Reaction. You're going to want to cast this every time that it's up. We take this because with the Orb of Infinite Depth in our cube, when we hit an enemy with our Explosive Blast, our damage is going to be increased by 10%. And our damage reduction is going to be increased by 20% for 6 seconds. We can have 4 stacks of that. Chain Reaction just constantly blows up to keep those 4 stacks up all the time. Now we have Black Hole Spell Steal, and we take this skill for the rune. Enemies hit by Black Hole are going to deal 10% reduced damage, and every enemy hit is going to give us 3% increased damage. So if we hit a lot of enemies, we deal a lot more damage. Storm Armor, Power of the Storm. We take Storm Armor because, remember, Halo of Carini is going to give us 80% reduced damage, and the power of the Storm Rune is going to reduce the arcane power of all of our skills to make sure that we can keep our Aquila buff up all the time to protect our Squirt's buff and keep us alive. Magic Weapon Deflection. This is going to give us 10% increased damage, and the Deflection Rune is going to give us a protective shield, once again, to try to protect our Squirt's buff. And finally, onto the main skill, Hydra, Mammoth Hydra. The Fire Hydra is going to summon a River of Flame, and enemies within that River of Flame are going to take massive damage. It's worth noting that if you were going to take the set version of this build, you would probably not use Mammoth Hydra and not go for Fire, because the extra heads only apply to a multi-headed Hydra, and Mammoth Hydra just has one. And finally, the skill that's completely bugged on the PTR that you will not see me using in the footage is Arcane Torrent Flame Ward. Remember, Arcane Torrent currently is giving us double these buffs, which is a gigantic power creep. But we will be using this on live. With the Flame Ward rune, we're going to take 15% less damage while we channel, and every second that we channel, we're going to increase the amount by 5% up to a maximum of 25% DR. And now on to the passives. Galvanizing Ward. As long as we haven't taken damage in the last 5 seconds, we'll get an Absorb Shield that absorbs 60% of our life and damage. It's going to help protect our Squirts. Audacity, we're going to deal 30% additional damage to enemies near us. That's fine, we'll stand on top of our Hydras. Elemental Exposure. If we hit enemies with Arcane, Cold, Fire, and Lightning, it's going to cause them to take 5% more damage from your attacks for the next 5 seconds. So every single element is going to stack 1 time. The interesting thing is the only thing that we're missing out of all these skills is Cold. So if you can get a Death Wish with Cold damage, then that will finish your full elemental exposure, and you'll be able to get all 4 stacks. And finally, Unwavering Will, standing still for 1.5 seconds, is going to give us 20% armor, all resistance, and damage. We're channeling anyway, so standing still for 1.5 seconds is no problem at all. And on to the cubed items. Serpent Sparker is going to give us an additional Hydra, and they're going to deal 600% increased damage. Remember, whichever one of these is better, you wear one and cube the other, doesn't matter. Orb of Infinite Depth, this is why we take Explosive Blast Chain Reaction. Every time we hit an enemy with our Explosive Blast, we're going to get 10% increased damage and 20% damage reduction. It can stack up to 4 times. It's incredible. And Unity, we'll put one of these on our follower and we'll take 50% less damage to protect our Squirts and stay alive. And now for the Paragon Points. I found that I didn't really need to take maximum arcane power, especially with both of these APOC rolls. I actually only had one and it was still fine. But if you find your Aquila buff dropping, then feel free to put it in Arcane Power, but I didn't. And I just took movement speed and then I poured all the rest into intelligence. For offense, take the crit hit chances first and then attack speed, and cooldown does nothing for us. You can take it, but it's not going to help. Armor first, then life, then all resist and life per second last. And finally, for the utility, area damage and resource cost first, and then life per hit, and then goal find is whatever. Alright everyone, so that's the build. Let me take you over onto the PTR where I cleared a 125 solo. I have 1700 Gons with no augments, and it was actually the first key that I plugged in 125 and I cleared it. Now granted, I got a very good map, so I just got lucky. Streamer buff, I guess. But I found between this wizard and the witch doctor and the barb that I had the easiest time clearing it with the wizard even without the double dipping. Let me take you into that footage now and explain to you how this build works. Alright everyone, I'm very excited to show you exactly how this build works. So when you zone into the rift, you're always going to be casting your explosive blast so you can stay alive. Activate your storm armor and your magic weapon, and those should be up for most of the rift. And then what we're going to do all the time is when we get to new areas, we're going to summon 2 Hydras and then just channel. And if we see an Oculus ring, just run there and channel your skill. You don't even have to aim it any particular place. I mean, we do have Stricken, so you can aim it at the yellow or at the elites if you see them, but really it doesn't matter all that much. So I move ahead, I drop 2 Hydras, and I start channeling. That's all there is to it. And as you're channeling, it's going to automatically throw out the black holes for you. And this build is actually pretty incredible, and I found it pretty fun to play, and compared to the Witch Doctor and the Barb builds as they are, it had the highest quality of life. So we move forward here, and Hydra, try to aggro everything. You can see as I channeled it threw out a black hole, trying to gather everything up, and channel. I mean, that's all there is to it. So let me explain to you the kind of the fiasco that's happening on the PTR. If you use Arcane Torrent, which is the skill that I advised to use in the build guide, but you don't see me using it here, it double dips on all the channeling buffs, and it just gives you an outrageous power boost. I can say with 99% certainty this is going to be fixed before it goes on live. So I wanted to show you guys what the real power level of this build is. Now my wizard is 1700 Gons and has pretty good gear, but it has no augments. So not too high of a character, and remember, this is the first key that I plugged for 125. So, you know, with a little bit of fishing, even though this is a really godly map, you may be able to go even higher. And so I think this is going to be one of the stronger solo builds going into Season 20, and it is very user-friendly. It's very easy if you are just getting started, or you're coming back and you were sick of Bazooka and you wanted to play some new build for the wizard. This one's pretty darn good. So one outrageous thing is you can see me standing there taking all those fatty explosions and didn't touch me at all. It didn't even knock off my Squirts buff. So this build is also very tanky and very good for hardcore as well. You could take the cheat death for hardcore, and I don't know, maybe it's not a great idea to wear Squirt's necklace. Maybe you could use Flavor of Time or something. But this is a very, very tanky and beginner-friendly build. So pretty much what I do is I look for the elites, and the Hydras attack whatever monster is closest to them. So I try to put the Hydras right next to the yellows and have them go to town there. So I see this archer, he's not moving, so you notice I put the Hydras right next to him and start channeling. And I think at a moment here, if I remember this clear correctly, it's going to come down to an archer and one little trash mob. And you'll notice that my Hydras are attacking the trash mob, so I take the time to reposition them in order to get the elite down faster. So that's the main thing that you're going to want to be paying attention to. As I casually stand on an arcane beam and take no damage whatsoever, I mean, this build is ridiculous. One of the yellows is down. You can see my right Hydra is shooting that zombie. I don't like that at all. So I put the Hydras right next to the archer and channel, channel, channel. Of course, the archer runs away from me. He wants to live. The Hydra's hurt. I'm sorry, my friend. There's no escaping. I will chase you to the end of the world until you're dead. Give me my orbs. Thank you. So obviously we do the most damage on the fire cycle, but once you find a good spot and you get your Hydras up, go ahead and just let it rain. And stacking area damage where you can on this build is really going to help. It's just going to help clear out all this trash here. So the mothers are doing an amazing job, giving us a lot of zombies that we can kill. Put our Hydras up and, I don't know, just let it rain. That's all there is to it. So, let me take this moment as we watch a little bit more of this footage to talk to you about some of the other builds and some of my impressions of the PTR so far. Let's talk about solo. I would say the Hydra Wizard of the new sets is probably the best one. Even if the Witch Doctor can compete with it and may be able to clear a bit higher, the quality of life on the Hydra Wizard is so much better that I would recommend the Hydra Wizard a lot more than the Witch Doctor one. And as we discussed before, if you run the set version of the Hydra Wizard, then your Hydras can die, and if your Hydras die, then sometimes you die. And there's some bugs with it. Blizzard is aware of the bugs. Hopefully they will all be fixed, but there's no guarantee. I had a lot more fun doing the Legacy of Dreams version. So I think I will release the Witch Doctor solo build tomorrow. With the Witch Doctor, I was able to do a 115, and the problem with the Witch Doctor is survivability. The build is really fun. The build visually looks amazing. You're just shooting these little, I don't know, blue comets everywhere. It's a very active build. You're constantly mashing buttons, which is very fun. A very fun play style. The problem is on my Witch Doctor, I kept dying because I had absolutely no sustain on my build. Just dying, dying, dying. So I finally bit the bullet. I didn't have perfect gear, and I put some life on hit rolls on various pieces of my gear, and then I actually cleared the very next key. So if the build goes live for the Witch Doctor exactly as it stands, you are going to need to manage your rotation a lot better than the Hydra Wizard, and you are going to have to work a lot harder to stay alive, and you are going to need very specific rolls on your gear. At least for me, I'm not the world's greatest Witch Doctor player, but at least for me, that's what I needed, and I was able to get the 7th highest Witch Doctor clear. So that guide will be coming out tomorrow. And then the Frenzied Barbarian has 2 issues that are really, really hurting it. The first issue with the Frenzied Barbarian is there is no reasonable way to get infinite Wrath of the Berserker. And when you lose Wrath of the Berserker on the Frenzied Barb, you either don't have enough damage, or you die, or both. Or what you have to do is run around kind of like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to solve that problem. Now, I was with some pretty smart barbarians in my stream today, theory crafting it, and there didn't seem to be a great way to fit something like Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac into your build, or Messerschmitts, or anything like that. And especially when you're trying to push high, there's no guarantee that you're going to be mowing trash anyway. So it would be amazing if Blizzard would take a look at the set and find a way where to give you cooldown on your Wrath of the Berserker while using the Frenzy set, and that would help it a lot. With that problem fixed, it would be a little bit more in line with the builds, but I feel like it might need a little bit more damage as well. I think the survivability will be there, but the damage seems to be a little bit lackluster. The playstyle, when I have my Wrath of the Berserker up, is fun to me. So I thought the Frenzy Barb, I actually thought all of these were pretty fun to play. But the Hydra Wizard was the only one that seemed pretty in line with everything, and is the build that may be the closest that's ready to go live once they fix all the bugs. Now, but remember, I'm using the Legacy of Dreams version and not the set version. People are complaining about the set has a whole new set of bugs with it as well. So the Hydra set needs some work, but if the Hydra set doesn't get fixed, don't worry about it. Just do this build and you'll be fine. All right, anyway, let's get back to the wizard gameplay. Just didn't want to repeat myself 100 times. So we cleaned up that festering woods with a pretty good lead. Once again, really no threat of ever dying. Totally fine. We walk forward, we set up, we drop 2 Hydras, we channel. If we see an Oculus, we move into it. We've got Transformers. It's a very valuable mob type. And the Hydras last about 15 seconds. I believe it's 15. So if they, right before your fire cycle, make sure to refresh them. And remember, one more time, the Hydras attack whatever is closest to them. So move your Hydras wherever you think the most monsters are, and they're going to shoot out those little flames, and anything standing in those flames is going to take massive damage. So let's move on up here and let's finish this off. You see the Transformers up there, up that ramp. I'm purposely trying not to black hole them, not to disturb them, as of course I go back up and my channel black holes them and disturbs them, because I want them to transform into unholy thralls so we can get a little bit more value out of them, because they're worth a lot more after they transform. And then we get our 2 Hydras down, and you know the drill by now. We just shoot our little channeling beam, and there they all go. And then we'll bring up the Guardian, and the Guardian is no problem as well. I had Stricken in for this clear, but you're going to see I had some pretty heavy damage for the Guardian. So at some lower level clears, you may be able to get away with not using Stricken, and you can take Bane of the Trapped in its place. And that's what I was doing for a lot of the time. For some of the lower level clears, Stricken is not needed. But once again, you see I'm giving the yellow a hug, and I put the Hydras right on the yellow to make sure that they attack them first. And then we just laser beam them down. I'm actually going to kind of miss the laser beam. It looked like Cyclops from X-Men. But I guess we'll go back to the Arcane Torrents if they fix it. And by the way, if they don't fix it, everyone in the world will be playing Hydra Wizard. And one other thing I should mention is Necromancers are outrageously strong just because of how good the seasonal buff is. So I will be showing you guys a lot of guides for the Necromancer, and I think most people, barring any significant changes, will be starting as a Necromancer to do rat runs. And that is a very, very powerful way to get to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 Gons quite quickly. And then you can switch to whatever class that you'd like to main to finish off Season 20. So if you've never done rats before, for most people, the first time that you do rats, it's a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend checking out that video when I release it. And for those of you that have done rats for 20 seasons, well, it's going to be another season of that, because I think they're going to be the best XP meta, barring any changes. That's going to wrap it up for me, guys. I hope you guys liked this build. I had a lot of fun playing it. Many more build guides are going to be coming over the next few days, along with a leveling guide and a tier list. Thank you.